Today I'm going to be reviewing Blade Trinity, but as it's the third film in a series, let me talk briefly about what came before it. Blade is a Marvel Comics character who first appeared in the 1970s Tomb of Dracula comics, and is most associated with the comic series Night Stalkers. In that, he's nothing more glorious than your typical vampire hunter who uses oak stakes and his wits to hunt the undead, alongside his friend Hannibal King, a vampire who's also a good guy. In the first Blade film, they reinvented the character as a Dhampir, a half-vampire. The vampire Deacon Frost bit Blade's mother as she was pregnant with him, which gave him all of a vampire's powers, but none of their weaknesses, save for the bloodlust. He hunts vampires who see him as a legendary scourge, the Daywalker. The first film gives the character's origins, as well as introducing a small supporting cast and giving us a big showdown with Deacon Frost. The sequel, Blade 2, has Blade going up against a mutated race of vampires called Reapers, and having to ally with vampires to take them down. Most people consider Blade 2 to be better than the original, and the best in the trilogy, though I personally think the first two movies are pretty equal in terms of quality. In Blade Trinity, Blade finally meets Dracula. While other movies have attempted to give Dracula an identity, such as Vlad the Impaler or Judas Iscariot, the characters in Blade Trinity simply say they don't know who the hell he is, except that he was the first vampire. And he doesn't have the same weaknesses as usual vampires, so he's a lot like Blade. In the beginning, some vampires unearth him in the Syrian desert, though later they say they found him in Iraq, which is a strange inconsistency and not the only one in the film. Dracula at first looks like a demonic Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat, and then he takes on a more human form, that of a guy who kind of looks like he's a total douchebag. Blade has issues of his own, as he's caught on videotape killing a familiar that was posing as a vampire. This leads to another inconsistency. Whistler, Blade's father figure and weapons maker, claims that this is a problem because if killing vampires is easy to get away with, they leave nothing but ash, but killing humans is messy. Though later Blade claims to have killed over 1,000 familiars, so the fact that he's just now getting caught and actively hunted by the FBI is pretty silly. Whistler gets killed, Blade gets captured, and then rescued by the Night Stalkers, with Ryan Reynolds as Hannibal King and Jessica Biel as Abigail, Whistler's daughter. Biel is fairly wooden, and Reynolds apparently thought he was playing Deadpool, as he acted way more like that character than Hannibal King. I have a particular issue with Whistler dying and then later being shown as a vampire. They already fucking did that in the first two movies, and you never see the vampire Whistler after the one scene he appears in. Well, anyway, everyone seems to think the return of Dracula, or Drake as they call him, is pretty meaningful. The vampires want to use him for their final solution, killing off all the humans and only keeping a few alive as blood slaves. They also say they want to use him to kill Blade. The Night Stalkers want to use his blood to fuse with a virus they call Daystar, which can potentially destroy all vampires on the planet. The film is full of inconsistencies, and Drake is the biggest one. Sometimes I kind of like him. He apparently went into a slumber because the world disgusted him, and it disgusts him even more now. I do like the one scene where he's in a store that specializes in selling vampire-related merchandise. You see Dracula lunchboxes and Dracula dildos and Count Chocula cereal. The look of pure disdain on his face was pretty good. However, at other times, he's a total asshole. In one scene, he claims that he and Blade are alike, and they both fight with honor. He also says that while using a baby as a human shield, so I couldn't really take him seriously right there. The addition of Ryan Reynolds really doesn't work, though I think he's a great Deadpool, he's a crappy Hannibal King, and the constant jokes really didn't fit the Blade series. The entire thing seems tacky in comparison with the first two films, which were excellent. Even the special effects are significantly worse, and the action seems pretty lame compared to Blade 2, which is a pulse-pounding adrenaline fest. Blade Trinity is more of a comedy-action hybrid, what with all the fart jokes and one-liners that come with it. There's one scene where Hannibal King fights Triple H, and of course there's some wrestling techniques used. It's nothing more than pandering, and while it must have been fun to create the scene, it clashes badly with the sword fight between Blade and Drake, which in itself is unspectacular compared to the sword fight he had with Deacon Frost in the first movie. If you watch all three movies back to back, you can't help but be disappointed by Blade Trinity. It fails as a Blade movie, and fails as a Dracula movie. Drake is supposed to be the ultimate vampire, but he seems tame compared to the villains Blade has faced in the past. There's too many jokes, and the entire movie just seems half-assed. After it was released, Wesley Snipes sued the filmmakers. He claims to be upset that he lost screen time to Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds, and you can see where he's coming from. The movie's called Blade Trinity, not Night Stalkers. He also said that as a producer, he should have had creative input, but he had none, and I'd like to think he would have made the film better if they let him. He always said that once these issues were cleared up, he'd make a fourth movie, but now he's in prison for tax problems, so it looks like it might never get made, which is a shame, as I feel the series could be redeemed. Lastly, I want to mention the ending, or, as I should say, endings. There's several different versions of the ending. In one, Dracula makes himself look like Blade before he dies, so the FBI would call off their manhunt, but his body turns back to normal in the morgue. Does that mean he's not dead? And what does it mean for the manhunt? It makes very little sense, especially that you see a character that Blade has clearly killed earlier in the ending. I believe I've also seen two different versions of that ending. One where you see Drake's transformation before he dies, and another where he just dies and later you see the fake Blade in the morgue. There's another ending where the cops actually get Blade's body, but he's not dead and he seems to have become more vampiric. I don't understand this. Would Dracula just evaporate? And lastly, there's an ending that's almost too stupid to be true, where they wind up fighting werewolves. They scrap this idiocy early on, but you can still see it on the DVD. Anyway, Blade Trinity pretty much fails on every level, though there are a handful of interesting scenes throughout. I personally think that they could have handled Dracula a lot better. He just comes off as a dick, and has none of the majesty or creepiness of the character. He's not even a badass. I liked this film a little bit the first time I saw it, but every time I watch it, it gets worse and worse. I do recommend the first two Blade movies, and I'll even give them a score. They both get 9s, but Blade Trinity gets a 3 out of a possible 10.